we're going to share we already did the pays work last week. We're going to jump back to number 3, strategic priorities update. And the presentation is attached, but also what's attached to the agenda is a report that's fairly lengthy. We're not going to go through all of that. But my one suggestion would be in July, when we don't have as long of an agenda, what we could do is have a follow-up conversation regarding any facet of what we included in regard to our reflection on the year and what we've been able to do this year. And for the priorities, you see the 7 areas that we developed as a framework for prioritizing our work as an organization this year. And we're going to have a few members of the team share some highlights of specific sections. Justin, we wanted to have the reflection on our year in review with DEI, so we're not going to revisit that in here, although it is part of the report update. Right now, we're gonna shift to the student and employee well-being piece. Meg is at a graduation for her doctorate right now, so congratulations to her. So I voluntold Lou that he has this section. So we're going to start out with employee and well-being, and although Meg did share an update with what was happening with our screening late fall, we are going to touch on some of the other aspects here. So Lou's going to touch on this, then we're going to roll into student learning and move from there. So thanks, Dr. Chance.
Thank you, Dr. O'Donnell. As he mentioned, so there were 8 different areas that we targeted from a student and employee well-being standpoint, which are more thoroughly described in the memo that you received, but we're just going to touch on a few highlights. Ms. Shealy is scrolling here, so we'll try and stay in sync. So the 2 things that we want to touch on is first, as it relates to student well-being, you might recall for the first time this year, we expanded our administration of our behavior screener, Review 360, to 9th grade in our comprehensive high schools. In prior years, we administered it K through 8 and in 9th grade at STEM, but this year we did conduct that assessment in 9th grade at East and West. Also, we provided monthly leadership team professional development for our school principals and central office administrators relative to multi-tiered systems of support as it relates to academics and behavior, with sort of underpinnings around how we operate at the school level, how we use student data to make sure the students are getting what they need in all 3 of those areas. If you look at the next slide, so this is the results of that, what really amounts to baseline data at our comprehensive high schools. And again, the Review 360 is a series of questions that we ask students that gives us some benchmark information relative to behavior and mental health, and then gives us the information you see there. So the percentage and number of students who fall into the normal risk, elevated risk, or extremely elevated risk categories as a result of the feedback that they provide. You'll see that 19 of our students combined at each of our high schools in 9th grade fell into that extremely elevated risk, and 119 the elevated risk, and you can certainly see the percentages there. What that allows us to do is follow up with those students on an individualized basis, whether it's the school counselors, prevention specialists, or other members of the school team, to make sure that we're providing proactive supports and intervention on behalf of those students relative to their social emotional needs. We'll continue to administer the Review 360 screener now K through 9, and I mentioned that being baseline data that will allow us to then follow through with students who have need going forward. Some other information relative to student and employee well-being. So you might recall that for the last few years we've been cited for our disproportionate discipline of students who are African American, specifically students with IEPs. And so we undertook some steps to address that this year, and I'll share some additional information with our Youth Truth data, which speaks to the culture and climate at our building level. So over the course of the last 3 years, we have been cited by PDE for, again, over discipline, over-identification of students with IEPs who are African American in terms of out-of-school and in-school suspensions. So in 2020 and 21, you'll see we were cited for both in-school suspension and total removals separately, the last 2 years for in-school and out-of-school suspensions combined. The challenge with this data, as you can see, is it's a lagging indicator. So we were cited this year again, 2023, for data that speaks to the school years 2019 to 2021. So when I talk about the things that we're doing to address this, it's unfortunate that we really won't be able to recognize potentially any of the merits of that until future years. But Ms. Sheila, if you could scroll there. So this year, we implemented school-wide positive behavior support measures in our high schools for the very first time. And as you can probably imagine, when it comes to in-school and out-of-school suspensions relative to discipline, we do primarily find those incidents occurring at our high schools, so it's relevant that this step was taken at that level. We also added some additional mental health support at our secondary schools, specifically as it related to SAP support at our middle schools. And we also identified and began implementation of a drug cessation program. The idea being that certainly there are times where we have to initiate discipline for those types of infractions, but obviously our goal is to support students should they have addictions related to whether it's alcohol, drugs, et cetera. And so we're looking to implement that and did so this year for the first time. In terms of our Youth Truth climate data, as Mr. Brown just shared, and you got a glimpse of, our Youth Truth survey provides us with quite a bit of information. We're just sharing with you here some of our student feedback at each of our elementary, middle, and secondary levels. And so there what you'll see is some overarching themes related to engagement, relationships, culture, and belonging. The thing to know about this data is that there are actually multiple questions that students are asked that relate to each of these sort of domain areas, so that 89% speaks to student responses on a variety of questions related to engagement, for example. At the elementary level, that percentage is the number of students who responded with a 3 to a particular question on a scale of 1 to 3. So 89%, for example, responded with a 3 on a scale of 1 to 3 on questions relative to engagement, and you can see the other percentages there. You can also see that the colors, again, indicate a percentile ranking, as Mr. Brown articulated as well. So that purple color means that our 89%, while good, ranks us in between the 50th and 75th percentile of all the schools that took this survey throughout the country. And so again, by the same token, that 28%, that's a relatively low number, something we want to take a look at improving. However, it does fall within the 75th to 100th percentile across the country, so there's still some positives there. And that last column is the change in percentage from last year. So you can see there's a slight decline in that engagement number, but an increase in the culture number. So those are things that we keep an eye on year over year. So here's our middle level data. Similarly, you'll see some lower percentages, but still some positives relative to percentile. But obviously, we've still got some work to do at the middle level. And I think when you look at the high school data, you'll see the same thing. So again, some relatively lower percentages as they compare to the elementary level. But again, some of those percentages, particularly in the 75th to 100th percentile and even 50th to 74th percentile, do show some positives there. That relationships measure is something we're going to want to look at the high school level, of course. But again, there's some solace there in knowing that we at least saw some increases in terms of percentage change year over year. So relative to student learning, again, quite a few things that we addressed this year, and we have some student data just to indicate kind of maybe how we did in those areas relative to student progress, specifically as it relates to our academic benchmark data. Go ahead and scroll to the next slide there. Yeah, so you might remember in November we had a conversation about some of our academic data, and at that point I spoke to really what our AIMSweb Plus benchmark is. But just as a quick refresher, what AIMSweb Plus is our universal screener. We administer it 3 times per year in the areas of math and ELA, or more specifically reading. And what we use this data for is to identify students who may be performing below benchmark so that we can provide them with interventions aligned with their particular need, with the hopes that with that intervention over time we see them moving into that what's referred to as Tier 1, or really meeting benchmark. And so what you see here is that dark blue bar on the left is our fall administration. The lighter blue in the middle is winter, and the lightest blue there on the end is our spring administration. And what you're really looking at is by grade level, the percentages of students who fell below benchmark or in what we refer to as Tier 2 or Tier 3, such that they required a more direct level of intervention. So there's some pretty positive information here and some things to celebrate. What you'll see, particularly in kindergarten and first grade, is that in the fall we saw higher numbers of students falling below benchmark. Important to note, to kindergarten, second, third, fourth, fifth grades, those are all composite scores. And so it's information related, for example, at the kindergarten level to letter naming fluency, letter sound fluency, those types of things. And again, second, third, and fourth, it's a composite score of multiple measures. In first grade, it's just an oral reading fluency measure, which might lead to some of our higher numbers, but nonetheless, it's what AimsWeb Plus uses as the information that we should be looking at to determine if they're at or below benchmark. So again, in the fall, particularly kindergarten and first grade, we had some higher numbers of students who came to us not where they should be, frankly. And so we're pleased to see the amount of progress we made. And frankly, I think when we look at kindergarten and first grade, we made a significant amount of progress, and really more specifically, our students made a significant amount of progress as a result of the work that our teachers, our literacy specialists, and our school teams did to address their needs. Similarly, while in the fall in grades 2 through 5, we didn't see the quite as high numbers coming in below benchmark, we did see tier movement in all of those grade levels. And worth noting, we'll probably want to take a look at in grades 2 through 5 why we saw a decrease in the winter and then a slight uptick in the spring. So that's something we'll look at, but nonetheless, good to see again that progress made from fall to spring for our students who fell below benchmark. In math, what you'll see is, again, some good information in terms of how we moved students who began the year below benchmark but ended the year where we want them to be. And that's really across the board. What you'll notice, too, is in the fall, though, as compared to reading anyway, we didn't have quite as many students who came to us below benchmark, which is a good sign for us moving forward.
Dr. Dude is going to touch on some of our personnel highlights that we'd like to share.
Thank you, Dr. O'Donnell. So these are the 5 areas that we focused on for personnel for our strategic priorities for the 22-23 academic year. First, we can talk about recruitment fairs. So in the fall, we held our support staff recruitment fair. We had over 67 attendees, and we offered we made 18 employment offers from that job fair. That was held on November 3rd of 2022. Fast forward to the spring of 2023, most recently, we held our Careers in Education Fair, which was for both support staff and professional staff. We had over 200 attendees at West. Thank you to all the staff from support, maintenance, facilities, administration that came out to help us make that Career in Education Fair successful. We've made 11 offers, and there's a plus sign behind that because it's still climbing as of 6/13/23. Actually, today we made 3 additional offers. So we're very excited about those job fairs. We had a lot of face time with some really exciting potential candidates. The countywide recruitment campaign, this is something that Mrs. Shealy and I presented on a few months back. And we partnered with the Chester County Intermediate Unit on this. We already have membership through their consortium for professional hiring, and this was something that the Chester County School Districts pulled together and said, what can we do as a county to really spread awareness of careers in education geared towards specifically support staff. We did include teachers, but it was really geared towards support staff and trying to get people to understand that there are many different careers in education other than teaching. We have food service, custodial, bus drivers, substitutes, support staff, maintenance, facilities, and all the districts came together. Instead of having a Downingtown billboard and a Coatesville billboard and a Phoenixville, we all came together and had one careers in education in Chester County effort. And we're very excited to report that this came out of the CCIU, that we reached over 1 million people in paid Facebook and Instagram ads, interactive map tag opens, that was we had a interactive website where there was a map of the county, and you could click on a district to see where that district was located, and then it linked you directly to the website. And we're actually very proud to say that Downingtown remained throughout the 5-month campaign the most visited district website countywide from that landing site, so that's very exciting. And then you can see we had Google ad impressions, radio ad impressions, billboard impressions, and I learned something new today. I actually asked Jen about, how do we know how many people saw billboards, right? And she said there's all kinds of analytics that goes into this, such as traffic patterns, and in regard to the radio ads, how many people listen at certain times. So that was fascinating to me. So we feel that the countywide recruitment campaign was a success. We didn't pay any additional dollars for this. The Chester County Intermediate Unit actually used some of the dollars that we had already paid into for our professional staffing consortium that we're a part of. So we're excited to see if we can continue this into future years. Key staffing levels, these 4 bullet points, custodial, teacher substitutes, paraeducator, and bus drivers, these are some key positions that we have been struggling to fill, and were a center of our focus in regard to staffing levels. Custodial staff, this year rather, in July of last year, we decided to increase the starting rate for our custodial positions. We also increased the number of paid holidays that we're offering this group. And as you can see, we're pleased to report in the fall of 2022, we were sitting at 14 custodial vacancies, which was about 20% of that workforce. Now, in this spring, we're sitting with 6 custodial vacancies. Now, that fluctuated all year. We were down to 2 vacancies at one point. So you can see we hired 12 custodial positions, and you might say, well, that math doesn't work. Well, that's because people came and went, right? So we had other people come and then other people leave through attrition. Paraprofessionals, in the fall of 2022, we had 42 paraprofessional vacancies. In the spring of this year, we had 25 paraprofessional vacancies. So we're very excited about that. We filled 107 paraprofessional positions in 22-23. And in the year prior, we hired only 66 paraprofessionals. So we're very excited about that. We're making headway, we feel, even though we still have vacancies. Increase in applications. We have an online application system that we can track numerous different analytics. And in the 21-22 school year, we had 2,172 people apply to jobs at Downingtown, and we're pleased to report that in 22-23, we had a 54% increase. We had 3,348 people apply for jobs at Downingtown. That is a direct result of recruitment efforts by everyone across the board. Anyone doing word of mouth recruiting, paid advertisements. Our website is our #1 chosen response when people say, how did you hear about this position? So kudos to the team that redid our website last year. This takes a village to get that number increased the way that we did. And that's it for personnel. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Duda. Ms. Shealy, communications.
Thanks. So for our communications priority, we wanted to ensure that we are communicating in a proactive and transparent manner with a focus on sharing the student experience. So to reach those goals, some of the things we honed in on were to make sure that our communications are easy to understand and that they are timely, highlighting the district initiatives and priorities, as well as sharing the student experience. We think it's important that our entire school community understand not only what the higher level district decisions are, but also what's happening in the classrooms. And then finally, we also supported the recruitment campaign that Dr. Duda was just referring to with regards to support through the countywide campaign, as well as through creation of some updated materials, digital and print materials as well. So we measured our success in a variety of ways, which are all outlined in the memo attachment. But one I wanted to highlight was our scope communication survey, because we just recently got those results. So first, as you can see from this chart, the idea of communications being timely, you can see 71% of our parents feel that it's timely. They strongly agree or agree. 68% of staff feel that way. And then we see here that our community does not feel as strongly as the other two stakeholder groups. So that really is an area of focus for us for the future. Next is communications are easy for me to understand. And again, we even see higher numbers here from our parents and staff. And again, that trend of having the community not quite as strong is seen here. Next is the perception of the district. With our focus on sharing the true student experience and all the fantastic things that are happening every day in our classrooms, the perception of the district has improved over the last year. If you remember last year, we did this communication survey as well through the same company. Now we have seen some gains. You see parents have increased by 0.2, and this is on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 is very poor and 5 is excellent. We've seen a larger increase in staff and then a small increase in community. And you can also see that national average there. There's a couple hundred school districts that work with this organization, and they have their communities fill out the same survey so that we have a basis for national comparison. And we do hope to see those numbers continuing to trend upward. And then finally, in a breakdown of that perception of the school district question, you can see 73% and 72% of parent and staff rated us as excellent or above average, with 61% of the community up there as well, which I think is a great measure. Again, that 19% there is in the below average or very poor is something that our team wants to focus on in the coming year. We have a couple of ideas for how to make sure our community is included and feels heard and knows the latest information happening in the school district. A couple of things that we've talked about is having a key communicator stakeholder group, which would involve us inviting community members, various heads of various organizations to come in for regularly scheduled meetings to have some two-way dialogue about what's happening in the district, the newest things happening in the district, and get some of their feedback on how those may be impacting them in the community. We're also talking about expanding our email communication list to include parents of graduates. So whenever a student graduates, their parents automatically get added to our community list so that we're not losing those contacts once students graduate. And then finally, taking additional steps to reach out to our 55-plus community. One important note with our community response is that we are the first out of the couple hundreds that this organization has done to reach the confidence interval of less than 10. But if we look at our actual numbers, 85% of our community responders were 51 or older. So we do need to make a real effort to focus in on our 55-plus community, things beyond just email and social media, even going out and visiting, getting some hard copies of things out into the community.
Mr. Mattis is going to take us through facility grounds operations as well as touch on finance.
Yes, and on our next slide, we're going to talk about transportation. We're going to talk about the 5th, 6th Center, and as we transition on to our full-day kindergarten program, and finally, we'll touch on our construction projects. If we talk about transportation first, and we look at the first column, start of the school year, and we talk about double bus runs, and that's when a single bus picks up 2 groups of secondary students in the morning and 2 groups of elementary students in the morning, and then does the reverse in the afternoon. So consequently, as you can see, we had about 25 buses that were doing double bus runs at the start of the school year, which means students had to wake up earlier to get the bus, and they consequently got home later from school. So if we look over towards the end of the school year column, we can see that we went from 25 double bus runs to 2 double bus runs. So good improvement. And that's a thanks to the board for allowing us to renegotiate the transportation contracts with our 3 contractors with a focus on driver wages. You know, that's where we wanted to focus. We talked about the recruitment campaign, and that has really paid off for us with the higher driver wages in conjunction with the recruiting. You can see there's tangible results there. Likewise, late buses. At the start of the year, we had many buses per day that were running 1 to 2 hours late, in the morning and particularly in the afternoon. And then again, at the end of the school year, we have maybe a couple of buses per week that are running 10 to 15 minutes late instead of hours late. So again, great improvement, and it's all about having the right staffing to be able to operate our schedule as it's planned. So good improvement there. As we talk about the 5th-6th Center, we start off the year by looking at, can we build a 5th-6th Center at Bradford Heights Elementary School? So we approached the township, we talked to the Board of Supervisors, and we just couldn't make the plan for the 5th-6th Center, the footprint, fit on the Bradford Heights Elementary site and be within the impervious coverage area that the township had set up. So through that process, the township was gracious enough to extend that impervious coverage number a little bit, so that'll help us as we do renovations at West Bradford and Bradford Heights in the future. But we had to rule out the 5th-6th Center at Bradford Heights. Consequently, we think we're likely to build a future 5th-6th Center on our McCausland property that's in East Brandywine Township on Horseshoe Pike, not too far away from the township building on the opposite side of the road. As we transition into our construction projects, I think the board and community probably knows at this point that construction at Downingtown High School East and West has started. So we have shovel in the ground, we have dirt moving around. Even before school was out, we started planning because we know summertime is our busiest time for construction, and we've got to get a lot of work done before students come back in the fall. So East and West are moving along. West is a very complicated project because there's a lot of different sections of the building that are getting touched. East, the construction is focused more on one area of the building, but East adds another wrinkle in that we're redoing the driveway and the crosswalk area of Devon Drive. So the whole driveway around East is going to be separated into a bus lane and a passenger car lane, and we're going to add a lot more capacity to get cars off of Devon Drive and off of Route 113. So we know we'll be able to improve traffic around the building, and hopefully that'll pay dividends to us as soon as this fall. So we're looking forward to that. The elementary projects, as I said, we're working on West Bradford and Beaver Creek. We're in design development of those two projects, working with our principals, our staff, or with our architects, and we've been working with the local engineers in the township and the borough. That process has been going very well. Next week, we meet with Downingtown Borough's Zoning Hearing Board, so that'll be really the first kickoff we have to moving this process along to the point where we can go out to bid, hopefully, in February of 2024, so not too far away. So that's our plans with construction. So we've got a lot of activity happening with construction. And our fiscal stewardship, we're going to talk about our 6-year financial plan and our capital plans as well as we move through this. So our fiscal stewardship, we've talked a lot about our budget. We've had many presentations on our general fund budget. And again, we put together a 6-year plan for our general fund budget, looking out towards establishing and building a 5th-6th Center in 2028-29. And as we go through, we went through several of these presentations. On the left side of this slide, we see the dark blue bars. And again, historically, we have had a positive revenue variance, meaning revenues exceeded expenses going back to 2013-14. But as you progress from left to right, you see that those blue bars are shrinking, meaning that revenues are more in line with expenses. And then as we start budgeting for this year, 22-23, and looking at the near-term budget over the 6-year period, we can see that we're projecting some near-term deficits, meaning expenses are likely to exceed revenues, but then building in the out years, the year 5, year 7, till we have a positive budget variance of $7 million of revenues exceeding expenses. We think that's the critical number to be able to achieve the operational support that we need to open up a 5th-6th Center. So that'll pay for the staffing, salaries and benefits, and utilities, and kind of the day-to-day expenses of opening up a new school then. And our tax rebate program, as part of our budget development process, the board wanted to enact a tax rebate program. This is our project as proposed is a mirror image of the state program that gives a rebate to renters and property owners that are eligible that had incomes below $35,000 per year. And our program would generate or rebate about 40% of the state program. And the state program's been in use since the early 70s, so it's very well vetted. So we're excited to get that working. We've been working with IT to set up a website, and we're developing content. And Dr. Matei is working on some of his new ticketing software to help us with our workflow. So we're excited to get this project kicked off and for it to be a success over the next few months.
Thank you, Dave. Dr. Matei.
Thank you, Dr. O'Donnell. Pleased to close out the report tonight on our 2022-23 strategic goals with two quick updates. Certainly, we could say a lot more, but the first is on improved security, and that's physical security, for which we replaced many hundreds of security cameras throughout the district, both inside and outside, and also on our online security, where we added multi-factor authentication to email. So all of our Downingtown employee email accounts, along with our confidential accounts, all require now multi-factor authentication. And I have some good news to report. Since the first time that we've had cyber insurance, our premium has decreased because of our efforts to improve security. So I'm very pleased to report that. In addition, we had enormous capital projects to improve reliability and redundancy. Well, what does that mean? At your home, you maybe have one internet service provider. Maybe you've got Verizon or Comcast. As a district as big as we are, now we have two internet service providers. And just in the last week, we saw an outage with our primary internet service provider that lasted 10 hours. No one knew it here. We didn't have to notify anyone. We didn't have to send any emails. And thankfully, within the last week of school, no downtime. There was no loss of instructional time. So that is the benefit of having redundancy and resiliency in our network. And that concludes my portion of the goal update.
Thank you, Dr. Matei. So the report that we included has a lot more that was included in the framework of what we called our strategic priorities. And our hope was to align our work as a district and to organize it. When we look back on the year and we started the year, the one thing we didn't talk about here was our biggest hope this year was to have a normal year and get kids back into school, get the numbers higher back into all of our extra and co-curricular programs. And I think at graduation, I think we all felt like this year was a blur. And that's what school had always felt like pre-pandemic. And so I think when we set out on the front end of the year and we were in the gym at West with all of our employees, that's what we were trying to get out there and do. And I think we did that. But with that said, we wanted to give you a thumbnail of some of the important things we felt we wanted to accomplish and move forward a step. And so I think reflecting on the year that it was a blur, I'm really excited it was, because it was a pretty normal year for kids and our employees.